Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Rudomin, and today we are continuing with our study of the book of Genesis, Bereshit, or Bereshis, and we'll be learning, doing, reading, studying, delving into Genesis chapter 16. In Hebrew, that's Tet Zayin. We don't say Yud Vav, 10 and 6, which is 16. We say 9 and 7, which is 16, because we don't use letters that come out to be in the name of God. So Yud Hey for 15 becomes Tet Vav. It's not 10 and 5, it's rather 9 and 6. And chapter 16 is not Yud Vav, because all those letters, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, I'm just saying it for educational purposes, amount to God's name. So instead of saying chapter Yud Zayin, or Yud Vav, we say Tet Zayin, which is 9 and 7 is 16, so it's chapter 16. And before we proceed, as I usually do, I'd like to discuss a few general principles. It'll help us give an orientation to understanding the chapter. It's also a good review, and it gives us the right hashkafa. Hashkafa means outlook. It's important to have the right hashkafa. It's like putting on the right glasses. You don't want to look at things with the wrong lenses and with the wrong shades. You want to make sure that you're looking at things in the right way, with the correct hashkafa, literally the way of looking at things. So in this week's, I'm sorry, I keep saying this week's, in today's chapter, we are going to be focusing on the subject of Sarai's, that's eventually she'll be called Sarah, her barrenness, her inability to have children. She's already pretty old, and she hasn't had any children, which leaves Abraham childless. So these themes of procreation, being fruitful and multiplying, and then childbirth, giving birth, and then the opposite of that, childlessness, infertility, fertility versus infertility. It goes back to the very first blessing that God gave, blessing, and you could say mitzvah, commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. So that's what human beings since the time of Adam and Eve do. We as we grow up, we become mature adults, even before we're mature adults in some cases, and we have children to procreate and recreate and keep on continuing. It's human continuity, the human race, keep life going. So that's a very important aspect and goal and direction that humanity has, having children. So not having children is the opposite of that. But there's an aspect that Adam and Eve failed in their total initial mission. It wasn't just that they were told to be fruitful and multiply. They were also told not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Eitz Hada'as Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when they ate from that tree, it caused death to be brought in the world, because God said, on the day you eat from that tree, you shall surely die. So so everything became tainted. Their life and even the blessing that God had given them to be fruitful and multiply was tainted. And in fact, the opposite did happen. Cain killed Abel. And then eventually Adam and Eve died, and all humanity dies. Death was brought into the world. So it's tainted. So now we need to have a program to reverse that. And that's the point of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. The 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then 10 generations from Noah till Abraham. That's humanity was waiting. God was patient. But then finally, when Abraham appears on the scene, and then awaiting the birth of his son Isaac, and then awaiting the birth of Isaac's son Jacob, and then awaiting the birth of Jacob's sons and family, the 12 tribes, and then from the 12 tribes, the 70 souls, and then from the 70 souls comes a huge nation that's formed in Egypt, the 600,000 and plus, additional people. So that's a process. And all of that is the reversal and return to the primal state, to the good condition that God wanted Adam and Eve to be in the Garden of Eden before Adam and Eve sinned. So now paradoxically, we see that the forefathers and our mothers, foremothers, I don't know what's the correct word, foremothers? I know forefathers to include mothers. But our fathers and mothers, Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, and then Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, they were all childless except for Leah. Leah is in a different category, but she is one of Jacob's wives that they are childless for a long time. And there's a lot of description and back and forth in the Torah about that. And as we'll see in the upcoming chapter, it has consequences. Things are done, maybe in haste. They say haste makes waste. Maybe they shouldn't have been done. Maybe they should have been done differently. But you know what they say, desperate situations require desperate measures, something like that. Serious situations require serious responses, and they're not always the ideal responses. So Abram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Rachel, Abram and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel, they remain childless for a long time, especially the women. The women are childless. And then after a long time, they give birth. And they give birth to special children, not special needs children. Today in the modern world, when we say special child, it means somebody who has a disability. No, we're talking about particularly gifted, outstanding children will result from these long periods of childlessness. And the commentators say that one of the reasons that our ancestors were childless for a long time was that God desires the prayers of the righteous. He wanted to hear their requests and their prayers and their broken hearts, pleading with God for children. And there is a happy ending to all of them, that they give birth to wonderful, great children who in turn become the foundations of the Jewish people. And I'd like to now discuss something sort of related to that comes up in this chapter, and that's the subject of bigamy. Bigamy means marrying more than one spouse, more than one wife. I mean, that's the traditional definition of bigamy. A bigamist is a man who marries two women. Now, in modern society, in Christian society, it's not allowed. In Islamic society, and in many other, I don't want to use the word primitive, but in many other cultures, like in Africa and in certain parts of Asia, having more than one wife is a reality. It happens. So now the question is, in Judaism, people have a lot of difficulty with this, that the Torah actually allows a man to have more than one wife. In fact, he can have a wife and he can have concubines. That's like semi-wives. Now, why is that? What is that about? So first of all, we need to realize the Torah doesn't say it's a mitzvah to have more than one wife. That should be clear. It's not one of the 613 commandments to have more than one wife. Otherwise, every man would run around taking more than one wife, right? Would try at any rate. So it's not a mitzvah. It's not a commandment to have more than one wife. That's for sure. Torah does not command a man, thou shalt have 2 wives or 3 wives or more than one wife. There is no such commandment, right? So there's no such commandment. So having one wife, we see that's in fact the ideal. Adam and Eve were created for each other. That's the ideal in the human race. A man and his wife, 2 spouses married to each other. But it also happens to be that the Torah does not say that it's a sin. Does not say thou shalt not take more than one wife. So, or it is a sin. Your soul will be cut off if you take more than one wife. There's no such thing. The Torah does not curse out or forbid or say it's a sin to have more than one wife. So it's neither a mitzvah, it's not a commandment, and it's not an avera. It's not a sin. It's neutral. So if you do or you don't, really, as far as the Torah is concerned, it makes no difference. It makes no difference. So yeah, ideally you have one wife, but if you happen to take more than one wife, good luck to you. I mean, that's the Torah does not forbid it. And that's how it was for a long, long time. And it was still practiced by Sephardic Jews. Ashkenazi Jews, about 1,000 years ago, there was a rabbi. His name was Rabbeinu Gershom, our Rabbi Gershom. Surnames were not in vogue then. So it was just, rabbis and people were known by their first name, son of so-and-so, that was a Jewish way, like the way you get called up to the Torah. You're so-and-so, son of so-and-so. Your surname, your family name is irrelevant, right? So a rabbi by the name of Rabbeinu Gershom is called Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGolah. Rabbeinu Gershom, the light of the exile, the shining light of the exile. That's his title. He has a title. Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGolah. The Rabbeinu Gershom, the light of the exile. What makes him light of the exile? He had the power to institute decrees that all of Ashkenazic Jewry had to abide by. He was like a kind of supreme chief rabbi recognized by everyone, and his authority extended over the entire European continent. So all of European Jewry, outside of Spain, that is, all of European Jewry outside of Spain, that means Germany and France and Central Europe, parts of Eastern Europe. The Jews were not yet 1,000 years ago so much into Eastern Europe. They were mainly in Germany and in France. Accepted his decree. It's called a cherem. Cherem means it's a decree on pain of excommunication. Cherem means to set aside, meaning someone is set aside, literally excommunicated from the community, meaning they cannot marry in the community, they cannot get aliyahs in shul, they cannot be counted as part of a minyan, they're shunned. So it's a very serious thing. Look, the rabbis didn't have the power of capital punishment. They couldn't execute anyone. That was something that wasn't done for 2,000 years now. I mean, since the destruction of the Second Temple. But they had the power of excommunication. So Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGolah made a decree on pain of excommunication from the Jewish community that a Jewish man was not to take more than one wife. So he made it official, pretty late in Jewish history, relatively speaking, but it is about 1,000 years ago that he made this called the Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom, that a man is not allowed to take more than one wife, except in extreme circumstances where it's necessary. Let's say a man's wife becomes, she loses consciousness and she's just lying there, or a man's wife goes mentally insane and she cannot take a get, meaning the divorce document, or there's other extenuating circumstances. I just gave you two where the woman is, let's say, very ill and she's unconscious, she cannot take a get, or she refuses to take a get. Let's say in a case where a woman refuses a divorce document from a man. So in such a case, the Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom has a clause that says if the man can get a heter me'ar rabbanim, an allowance of 100 rabbis, yes, to go around and get 100 kosher rabbis, Imagine that. He has to go and it has to be done under a Beth Din. 100 kosher rabbis have to give an allowance, and then there's an exception to the Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon. But that's pretty extreme. It still is done in our days. There are some men, some of them are famous rabbis even, that I know. Their first wife refused to give them a divorce, refused to accept the divorce document, and they then remarried based on the Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon. So technically, those men have two wives. That's what it amounts to. Since the first wife is not divorced, she remains the wife of the man, and then he has the green light to go ahead and marry a second wife. But that's only under extreme circumstances. For 1,000 years, Ashkenazi Jewry practiced monogamy. And they say a lot of it had to do with the influence of the Christians, because under Christianity, they took monogamy very seriously, and that there's no divorce. The Catholic Church was all-powerful and insisted that men only marry one wife. They didn't allow bigamy. So it was a big pressure on the Jews, and it would be unseemly. It would seem almost like rebellious against the Christians, that if the Christians are only allowed to take one wife and the Jews are allowed to take more than one wife, how will that look? What repercussions could that have? So some say that was one of the reasons he made that decree. But there are other reasons. I've heard other reasons. I'm not going into it. Whereas the Sephardic Jewry, the Jews of Spain and North Africa and the Middle East, never accepted the Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon. And until the modern times, until basically Jews moved to the state of Israel, a lot of Sephardic men had more than one wife. It was not uncommon, and there was no singles problem, as you can imagine. And when they got to Israel, Israel tried to clamp down on this, and now it's very rare. There might be some instances, but you'll find, let's say, amongst Islamic men in Islam, amongst Arab men, they have more than one wife if they want to, if they can afford. And that's also in Judaism. If you can afford and you can support more than one woman, you can have more than one wife. Originally, in the days of the Torah. So this is what we're going to be seeing. The reason I'm talking about it a little bit at length is because Abraham and Sarah are going to agree that Abraham should marry Hagar, who was their maid, given to them by Pharaoh. She was actually Pharaoh's daughter, that he gave her as a gift to Abraham and Sarah, more to Sarah. And so Sarah says, no, since Sarah is childless, she says to Abraham, you can go ahead, marry my handmaid, and let her become your new wife and have children through her, kind of a surrogate motherhood arrangement. And she agrees to have Hagar as a second wife. And she never reacts in it, even though at times she asks, she makes life difficult for Hagar for various reasons. And then eventually she's going to ask Abraham to expel Hagar. But Hagar remains Abraham's wife, even to the point where after Sarah dies, Abraham continues living with Hagar, and he has many children with her. She's renamed Keturah, some say. But so that's the subject of bigamy, introduction to a controversial and difficult to accept notion for us living in modern times. Now, so chapter 16, let's read as we usually do to get an overview. It's not a long chapter. There are 16 verses. So it's chapter 16 has 16 verses. Genesis chapter 16 has 16 verses. Let's read them. It's all about the birth of Yishmael. That'll be the son of Abraham and Hagar. So this is what happens now. Also, we're following a chronology of chronology in time, life's events. It's almost like it is. The Torah is a great book of literature. It's the greatest. It's the reason why it's the bestseller, because it has different acts and different scenes. If you ever studied literature, there's a play or there's a presentation, and there's an act, and there's a scene, and then or if you watch a movie, There's the big scene, and then there's the small scene. Sometimes the kids, so like there's the so to speak, the narrator, which is God in this case, the author of the Torah, will focus on different aspects, generally going chronologically, but different scenes. And now we are very focused on the life of Abraham. In chapter 15, we had Abraham doing the pact between the parts, Brit Bein V'Sarim. In chapter 14, we had Abraham and Lot and the war that Abraham fought. In chapter 13, we have Abraham moving out of Egypt and going to live in the land of Canaan. And in chapter 12, we have Abraham leaving his household. So it's been a while that we've been focused on Abraham, right? Starting from the portion of Lech Lecha, we're still in the portion of Lech Lecha, the 54 Torah portions. We're now coming to the end of the second one. We did, actually, the third one. We did Breshit, we did Noach, and now it's Lech Lecha, the third one, the third Torah portion. And so chapter 16 is part of that. Let's see what it says. Abram's wife Sarai, they're still called Abram and Sarai. Their names have not been officially changed yet to Abraham and Sarah. It's still Abram and Sarai. Abram's wife Sarai had not borne him any children. She had an Egyptian slave girl by the name of Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, God has kept me from having children. Come to my slave, and hopefully I will have sons through her. Abram heeded Sarai. After Abram had lived in Canaan for 10 years, his wife Sarai took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife. Abram came to her, meaning he had sexual relations with her. That's the Hebrew word ba. Yavo ba, to come, means to have sexual relations, sexual intercourse, marital relations. Abram came to her, and she conceived. When she realized that she was pregnant, she looked at her mistress with contempt. Sarai said to Abram, "It's all your fault. I myself placed my slave in your arms. Now that she sees herself pregnant, she looks at me with disrespect. Let God judge between me and you." Abram replied to Sarai, "Your slave is in your hands. Do with her as you see fit." Sarai abused her. That's how he translated it. Some say she made life tough for her, and Hagar ran away from her. Hagar ran away from home. An angel of God encountered her by a spring in the desert, in the oasis on the road to Shur. The angel said, "Hagar, maid of Sarai, from where are you coming and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she replied. The angel of God said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself to her." Another angel said in God's name, "I will grant you many descendants. There will be so many that they will be uncountable." Still another angel of God said to her, "You are pregnant and will give birth to a son. You must name him Yishmael, for God has heard your prayer. He will be a rebel. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. Still, he will dwell undisturbed near all his brothers." Hagar gave a name to God, who had spoken to her, saying, "You are a vision god." For she said, "Didn't I still see here after my vision?" She therefore named the oasis of life, my vision, Be'er Lachai Ro'i. It is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram's son. Abram gave the name Yishmael to his son, who had been born to Hagar. He was 86 years old when Hagar bore his son Ishmael. So that's chapter 16 verses in chapter 16. Now let's take a look at the Rushi. And I've been looking at the various midrashim and sources, and Rushi actually gives a very good summary of a lot of the main points. So Let's take a look at the Rushi Commentary. As you know, Rushi lived about 1,000 years ago in France, and he wrote this commentary that is used. So let's see now. Genesis chapter 16, verse 16. So now it says, Sarai eshet Avram loy yolda loy. And Sarai, the wife of Abram, did not give birth to him. She didn't bear him any children. Vela, and to her, shivcha mitzrit. She had an Egyptian maidservant, Ushma Hagar. So Rashi says shivcha mitzrit. So who exactly is this Egyptian maidservant or handmaid or servant? Who is she? Bat Paro Hayata. She was the daughter of Pharaoh. So she herself was a princess. She wasn't just like some, maid hired off the street to work for $10 an hour or something. She was a princess coming from the royal house of Pharaoh himself. And what actually happened that he gave his daughter to be a handmaid by Sarah and to serve Abram? When Pharaoh saw the miracle shenasu l'Sarah that were done to Sarah, because remember, Pharaoh had literally kidnapped Sarah and wanted to have intercourse with her. But things started happening all around him. He was smitten by a plague, and his members of his household were suffering. All kinds of things were going on to stop him from molesting Sarah. So these were miracles that were done on behalf of her. And so he said, he came to the conclusion, he was obviously a wise man, this Pharaoh. The Pharaohs were not stupid, obviously. They're considered to be the first so-called great civilizations are the Egyptian civilizations under the Pharaohs. Maybe that's because the Israelites were involved over there. So anything that involves the Jews turns out to be very successful eventually. But be that as it may, the Pharaohs were wise rulers. They may have been wicked and evil, but they were smart. So he said, it's better that my daughter should be a maid, a handmaiden in this house, and not to be a mistress in another household. Because this is a great household. I want to be attached to this household. And it was, if you think about it, the consequences, I'm just jumping a little bit, the strategic brilliance of it was that Pharaoh, in fact, he became the father-in-law of Abram. Because now once Abram is marrying Hagar, and she has children, so Pharaoh actually, his investment pays off. So he was not just smart, he was pretty brilliant and has, you can definitely say, merits that from his seed through Hagar and Abram come a lot of great nations, the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, the nations of the East, even the Babylonians. Many of them descended from Hagar. They say that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, was one of their descendants. So it was not a stupid, reckless decision. He did pretty good. And they're still around, if you think about it. They still have a lot of power in the world. And it'll be so till the times of the coming of the Mashiach. So now in verse 2, she says to Sarai, V'tamer Sarai al Avram, Sarai says to Avram, Hinena atzarani Adonai, God has restrained me, atzar, like has held me back, meaning from having children, miledet, from giving birth. Ba na el shivchati, come unto my maid. Now this sounds like it's impolite talk, like come to, like what, have sex with my maid. It was not tainted by our eroticized way of viewing things. They spoke in a very pure, down-to-earth fashion. Their words were wrapped in holiness, in sincerity. So she's not being lewd or anything like that. Come have a good time with my maid. She's being direct and specific. Come to my maid, meaning have relations with my maid. Ulai ibanem mimena, maybe I'll be built up through her. So here we see the concept, the notion of surrogate parenthood. There is such a thing. People have children through other people. They appoint a surrogate. There's different ways of doing it. But this notion does exist, and it is practiced in our times. But she does it. Ulai ibanem mimena, I'll be built up through her. Also, somebody's handmaid is considered to be like their possession. It's part of her. Yishmael Abram lakol Sarai. So Abram was a good husband, and he listened to the voice of Sarai. Now Rashi said, Ilu ibanem mimena. The usage of the word that maybe I will be built up. Baneh. Well, the word ben, son, is connected to the word boneh, build. A son. Through a son, you are building, like the word banim and bonim. Banim is sons, bonim is builders. Similar word, just different pronunciation, right? And so maybe I'll be built up through her. So why does she use the word built up? So Rashi says, Limad al mi she'ein lo banim. This teaches that somebody who does not have banim, sons, she'ein lo banui, that he is not built. Again, this play on the word banim, ibaneh, banim, banui, ela harus. Somebody who does not have sons, meaning somebody who doesn't have children, is not built up. And not only that, but he is harus. Harus means he's destroyed, destroyed. Ibaneh mimena. Now another interpretation, ibaneh mimena, b'zchut she'achnis tzaratzi letoch beiti. In the merit that I will enter, that I will give tzarasi, that tzara, it's interesting, the Yiddish word and the Hebrew word tzarat, tzara, comes from a co-wife, a rival spouse, an associate wife. So that's where the word tsaris comes from. Because when you have rival wives, you have tsarat. Literally, that's what they call it, tsara. You have tsarat, and because of the trouble, there's always cattiness and rivalry between the women. So, into my house. In other words, I'm doing something to give a merit to someone that's basically a stranger, to my rival. I'm letting my rival enter into my house. She's getting my share, so to speak. So in that merit, like share and share alike, she's sharing her husband, and she's bringing her into her own life, into her own home. Maybe in that merit, I'll be built up. It'll be as if I myself am being built up through her, through Hagar having children. Again, this concept of surrogate parenthood. And note the struggle with childlessness and wanting to have a child. So he listened to her. The Yishmael Avram lakol Sarai. Why does it say lakol Sarai to her voice? Why not just say Yishmael Avram le Sarai? And Abram listened to Sarah. Why does it say he listened to the voice of Sarah? Remember, every word, every letter has a teaching. In this case, there's an extra word here to the voice of Sarah. Obviously, if he's going to listen to Sarah, he's listening to her voice. Right? So what's the implication of having an extra word to the voice of Sarah? So Rashi says, L'ruach hakodesh Shabbat, to listen to her Holy Spirit. It's not just her speaking and she got a great idea and it's interesting and okay, I'll follow up. No, she's actually speaking with the Ruach HaKodesh. It's an important concept, with the Holy Spirit. It's a kind of level of prophecy where God's Spirit comes upon a person and then that person can communicate. Those are the prophets and the prophetesses, the great people who are able to communicate or to be conduits for the divine message through their own selves, their minds, their bodies, and their mouths, their souls. They communicate the messages from up above. Okay, chapter 16, verse 3. It says, Vatikach Sarai Eshet Avram et Hagar. And Sarai, the wife of Avram. That's the question. Why does it say wife of Avram? We know she's the wife of Avram. Anyhow, she took Hagar Hamitzrit Shivchos, Vatikach. So it says, Rashi says, Vatikach Sarai. What's this Vatikach? And she took. Right? So Rashi says, Lekachata bidvarim. She spoke to her with words. She induced her. I don't want to say seduced, but she induced her through her words. She encouraged Hagar through her words. Ashrayich shezachit ledavek beguf kadosh kazeh. Ashrayich, happy are you, rejoice that you are now able to cleave to such a holy body. Because in any case, Abram was very old, the commentators say. He was really like in his 80s. And Hagar was younger. So maybe she would have felt a little uncomfortable going with an older man. And so Sarah is encouraging her. On the contrary, it's a merit to be with such a person like Abram, whose body is holy. The guf kadosh kazeh, who has such a holy body. Remember what I said, Avraham eventually is the embodiment or the midat chesed. Not just is he a holy body, just like a holy man. He's above and beyond that. He's the actual embodiment, the incarnation of the attribute of loving kindness, of God's attribute of loving kindness, of God's name even, you could say, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud Hei Vav Hei. I'm saying it for educational purposes, which is the midat hachesed, the attribute of mercifulness, of loving kindness. Now, interestingly, there's something here. She said this, the verse says, Vatikach Sarai Eshet Avram et Hagar hamitzrit shivchata miketz eses shanim. After the 10 years, Leshevet Avram be'eretz Knan vatiten ota. LaAvram Isha lo Isha. So after Abram had dwelt in the land of Canaan for 10 years, they had come back from Egypt and they would dwelt in Canaan for 10 years. At the end of that 10-year period, she made this suggestion that that Hagar marry Avram and that they have children, and that those children will be considered hers. So what's this with the 10 years? Because Eser Shanim. So Rashi says, Mo'ed hakavur li'isha shesha'ata eser shanim v'lo yalda levala. This is a Jewish law, that this is a period of time that if a woman has been with a man for 10 years, v'lo yalda levala, and she has not given birth to children, chayav lisa acheret. He's obligated to marry another. So in the times of bigamy, when it was allowed, so you marry another woman. But this happens in our times. Let's say a man and a woman have been married for 10 years, and they want to follow this. It's not a command as such, but it's a kind of a strong custom, a strong minhag, that the man should, it's advisable, the man and the woman should separate. Basically, they get divorced, very tragic, and then the man should remarry and try to have children with the next wife. And what if that doesn't work? You try it a third time? I don't think you go beyond a third time. But this happens. This happens in our time. Sometimes couples choose to separate. I know of one such instance where a couple was married and they reached the 10-year mark, and they decided to get divorced. Apparently the relationship was good, but they were both very, very, very religious people, very frum people who wanted to do the right thing. So since the right thing to do is to separate, as we see over here, after 10 years, if a man doesn't have children, he should take another wife. It's the right thing to do as far as the Yiddishkeit is concerned, Judaism is concerned. So they did it, this couple separated. Now, I don't know if that man had children with another wife, but I do know that that woman, she was heartbroken that that she had to go through this divorce after 10 years. And she was basically a broken person as a result, as you can imagine. So it's a tough deal. Let's continue. Chapter 16, verse 4. Now it says, Vayava el Hagar. He came unto Hagar, meaning he had sexual relations, marital relations with Hagar. Vatahar, and she conceived. Vatere. Okay, let's just stop there. Vayava el Hagar vatahar, and she conceived. What's the news here? Vayava el Hagar vatahar. It could have said vatahar Hagar, whatever. It could have maybe found a briefer way of saying it. But there is a message here that Rashi wants to bring us. It's recorded in the Breshit Rabbah, the Medrash Breshit Rabbah, and it says, Mi bia rishona. Bia is sexual intercourse. Bia, like ba, and then bia. Bia is the Torah language way of saying, well, there's bia and then there's tashmish hamita, usage of the bed. But bia, from the first sexual intercourse that he had, that Abram and Hagar had, she became pregnant right away. Or as they say, she fell pregnant. Why fall? I don't know, but she became pregnant right away. And what happened next? Vatakel gvirta beineha. So now she becomes pregnant, Hagar becomes pregnant, and what happens next is she starts to look down on her mistress. Not good midot, not good character traits. Amra, so she said, what is this that she was that Vatakal, she looked lightly upon, she despised her mistress. What is that? Amra, so Rashi explains, she said, Sarai zu ein sitra kigluya. Now, this Sarah, she's a hypocrite. Her hidden side is not like her outward side. Mara atzma keilu hi tzedekis. She shows herself as if she's a tzedeket, as if she's a righteous woman. The ain't a tzedeket, and she's not a tzedekis. Shelo zachta leheroyon. How do I know she's not a tzedekis? Because she didn't merit to get pregnant. All these years she was with Abram. Vani nitabarti mibia rishana, and I got pregnant from our first encounter. So she took that as proof. You see, I'm better than you. I became pregnant right away, and you're already for years you're living with Abram, and you've never had a child with him. You never got pregnant. So that caused Hagar to look down on Sarah. So this has consequences. When I see this in just simple terms, it looks like a lot of female cattiness. You bring women together and they start getting like all the rivalry with each other. But there are deeper meanings here, because what you are seeing here is the formation, the future formation, and the roots of the rivalry between the seed of Sarai and the seed of Hagar. The seed of Hagar are going to be Yishmael, the Arabs, the Muslims, the nations of the East, the nations of the Far East. Well, that's a pretty substantial number and significant block of people who come into opposition to Sarah's son Isaac, and this rivalry continues. This cattiness and this rivalry between the Jews and the Muslims, between the Jews and the Arabs, continues right in the very present time, especially in the present time, with more and more Jews concentrated in the land of Israel, living in the state of Israel, and coming into contact with surrounding Arab societies and nations and groups. So this cattiness between them, this like constant like grinding the teeth at each other, trying to kill each other, this is where it originates, this rivalry between Sarah and Hagar. That's it. And all these, you have to see that these are like prophetic, the building blocks. If you want to understand the psychology, if you want to understand the roots, you see this is where it comes from. It comes from the core. It's visceral, as they say. It's from the guts. They feel it in their bones. Jews and Muslims, there's this rivalry, there's this struggle, there's this rubbing against each other, there's this conflict. What is this from? Where does this come from? Well, it comes because, and they both claim to be the seed of Abraham. How does it come to be? Seed of Abraham, Abrahamic religions fighting each other. No, we should live in brotherhood and peace. No, the origins are in conflict, and the lives are in conflict. The history is in conflict. Destiny is in conflict, the politics is in conflict, and the future is in conflict. Only in messianic times, in the futuristic times, will things calm down. Maybe we're headed there already, because it does say eventually Yishmael does teshuvah. That we'll see. We've seen, that's already been mentioned, that Yishmael will repent and will become a good guy, will join in and do what he's supposed to do to fulfill the messianic vision, the messianic mission of the Jewish people. In fact, I'll stop here just since I'm on this theme, that Maimonides says that there's a purpose, a higher purpose. Maimonides is a great Jewish codifier and rabbi and philosopher who lived about 850, 900 years ago, writes, there's a purpose to Christianity and Islam because they both spread the monotheistic faith, the teachings of the Bible throughout the world, and that the faith of Yishmael is purer. The Ishmaelites, the Muslims, their faith is purer than the Christian faith, because the Christian faith splits God into the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So it has a triple Godhead, and you're only supposed to worship God as one. So at least Muslims worship God as one. So, for example, practically speaking, what if you want to turn a church into a shul or yeshiva? You want to turn a church into a synagogue. So can you just that's it, automatically turn the church into a synagogue? No, you have to do something. You have to break a window. You have to perform an act to show that you are stopping that you're breaking the structure, because it was a place where idol worship took place. According to Judaism, since they worship the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, not to mention that they bow down to a cross, and the Roman Catholics have icons and the statue of Mary and statues of popes that they worship, or that's part of their worship. So that, to a degree, is a kind of idol worship. Whereas the Muslims don't have that at all. They worship Allah, God, which means Elohim, God, in a pure fashion. It's monotheistic. There's no statues, there's no symbols. And so if a mosque has to be turned into a synagogue, there's nothing to do. You just one day it can be a mosque, and the next day it can be a synagogue. Unfortunately, if you look at Jewish history, I think more shuls have been turned into churches and mosques than the other way around. Unfortunately, we've spent thousands of years in Christian society and in Islamic society, and we've built our synagogues and shuls and yeshivas in all these places. And when we've left, and even sometimes before we've left, they've already converted. There's a famous Alhambra place. It's a theater in Spain that used to be a synagogue, then it was turned into a mosque, then into a church, and so on and so forth. Same thing with the Temple Mount. It used to be the Jewish temple. Then when the Crusaders took it over, they built a church on top there. And then when the Muslims took over, they built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So we are the fighting cousins, not the kissing cousins. We're the fighting cousins. So these are the roots of the struggles between the Ishmaelites, the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians that we're learning about in the person of Hagar, Sarah, and Abram standing here, bridging the two of them. So Hagar thought of herself as a better person because she became pregnant right away, and Sarah, for all the years she was married to Abram, she was never pregnant and never had a baby. So we continue. So now Sarah comes with complaints to Abram. Vatame Sarai el Avram chamasi alecha. My wrong be upon you. Anachina tati shivchati bechekecha. I gave my maidservant into your midst, into your bosom. Vatere ki harata, and she saw that she conceived, she became pregnant. Va'eka be'eineha, now become despised or become light in her eyes. Yishpat Adonai b'ni u'beinecha. So she says to Abram, let God judge between me and you. So she's like invoking the heavenly tribunal here. Let God judge between us. What's going on here? It's not fair, right? So let's see what Rashi says. Chamasi alecha, my wrong be upon you. Chamas ha'asui li, the wrong that was done to me. Interesting, the word chamas means wrong. It also means thievery. Interesting, there's this movement, Islamic movement, Hamas, that rules the Gaza Strip. So in Hebrew, Hamas means wrong or thievery, or it can even mean anger. Hamasi ha'asui li alecha ani metila ha'onesh. I place the punishment upon you. In other words, the wrong that's done to me, it's not me, it's you. Well, you caused me this pain, this humiliation. I'm putting it on you. Why? Because when you pray to God, the Holy One, blessed be He, and you said to God, what will you give me? Seeing that I go childless. You only prayed for yourself. You should have prayed for the two of us. In a prior verse, Abraham, when God speaks to him, Abraham says, God promises him descendants, but he says, but look, I'm childless before you. So she says, why did you only pray for yourself? You should have said, we are childless. And then God would have looked with favor upon us. And Rashi continues, V'hayiti ani nifkeded imach, and then I would have been remembered, I would have been redeemed together with you. So we would have had the child. V'ad, and furthermore, another interpretation of chamasi, dvarecha ata chames mimeni. You steal, like you're stealing from me, shata shamea bizyoni v'shatek. Like you're stealing from me, like you're taking from me, you're taking from my honor because you're listening to the abuse the humiliation I'm being subjected to, and you are being silent. So what is Abram? Abram is caught between a rock and a hard place. These are his two wives now, and they're going at each other, right? One has, Hagar has a bit of a nasty character. Sarai has an aggrieved character, and Abram is caught in the middle. And she says, Anachi natati shivchati. I gave my handmaid, bechekecha, and then let God judge between us. Kol benecha shebamikra chaser v'zemalei kari bei uveinan shechnisa ayin hara beibura shel Hagar vehipila ubra. So this word beinecha, Rashi says, beini uveinecha has an extra yud. Let me find it. Right, at the end of the verse, it says, let God judge between me and between you. So the beinecha, there's an extra yud put in between the nun and the final chaf. So that is to say that little yud, what's that little yud? It's hinting at something, and it's not nice. So get ready for this. That Sarah gave an evil eye to Hagar, and Hagar miscarried. As a result of Hagar taunting Sarai, Sarai took offense And she, because she's a holy woman and she has these spiritual powers, she subjected Hagar to the evil eye, the ayin hara. It's called the ayin hara. Ayin hara, like when we say Cain hara or bli ayin hara, which means Cain without that evil eye, or bli without the evil eye, or Kanaina hara. We say Kanaina hara. We say there should be no evil eye, because there's a concept of the evil eye. It's a metaphor for how evil it's like a death ray, like a death ray from the dark side, so to speak, that can affect a person or a situation. So, and that's what it says. This extra yud in the word between me and you. So you could say Sarah is injecting herself into the relationship between Abram and Hagar, because now Abram and Hagar are parents to be, and Sarah interferes by giving an ayin hara to Hagar, and then Hagar miscarries. Shehichnisa ayin hara beibura shel Hagar vehipila ubara. Hu shamalach amer leHagar. And then, so tying it in with a little bit later, the angel said, there's an angel, as you remember that this is in the next verse, next couple of verses, when an angel is speaking to Hagar after she runs away from Sarai, who says to her, you're pregnant. So what's this about being pregnant if she miscarried? Well, Lokvar Hartab, she already was pregnant. In other words, what's the angel saying? You're going to get pregnant. But if she was pregnant, why would the angel say you're going to get pregnant? So it implies that she had lost. So it teaches you that she lost her first pregnancy. Okay, it's a sad story. And this is unfortunately sometimes how it happens. So she lost the first baby. And there's a similar thing with David and Bathsheba. King David falls in love with this woman, Bathsheba, and she's still technically married to another man, and he has relations with her. There's a whole reason that's given. That her real husband had given her a conditional divorce, so it was as if she was divorced. But still, King David shouldn't have done it. He took advantage of a woman who was still technically married, but technically divorced at the same time from her original husband. She became pregnant, and then she lost that baby. But later she became pregnant again and had Solomon. So this theme comes up. Like, don't mess around in relationships. It's dangerous when you have these mixed relationships, more than one personality involved in a relationship. Couples, thruples, today they have all kinds of combinations. It's not good because the results are not good. It can never be good. And here you see it. And number 6, and then it went even further. Vayomer Abram and Sarai, hinei shiv chasech b'yadech, asei lach hatov be'enayich. So he didn't want to do anything either way. He's neither going to do anything good nor anything bad. I'm not interfering, basically. He's saying, do as you wish. So what did she do? Vata'aneh. She dealt harshly. Inui means to Vayanunu, that the Egyptians afflicted us. She made life hard for Sarai. Vataneh Sarai, hayta meshabedet ba bekoshi. She made her do difficult things. There's different interpretations of what she made her do. Let me read one of them that I saw. No, it must be in another one. Sorry, I don't see it here. Let's just continue with the Rushi. But she did other things. There's interpretation. She did other things to to make Hagar's life miserable. She made her carry the water. She made her carry towels. She made her do menial work. She was degrading her as a punishment. So no wonder Hagar ran away. Now she ran away. Vata'aneh Sarai, she afflicted her. Vativrach mipaneha. So she, meaning Hagar, ran away. Chapter 16, verse 7. Vayimtza'a malach Adonai al ein hamayim bamidbar al ha'ayin b'derech shur. So an angel found her. Vayomer Hagar shivcha Sarai, e mizeh bat va'ana telechi. From where are you coming? The angel said, from where are you coming and where are you going? I'm fleeing from my mistress Sarah, ani barachat, I'm fleeing. E mizeh bat, mehechan bat, from where you coming? So what, the angel didn't know? Question. An angel from God doesn't know where you're coming from and where you're going. He has to ask you. So Rushi explains, Yodea, he knew, they knew. These angelic beings knew. Elaliten la petach likanes ima bidvarim. But he gave her an opportunity, an opening to enter into a dialogue, a conversation. Right, so it says that there's a question, there's a debate. How many angels came to Sarah? I'm sorry, I keep saying Sarah. Came to Hagar. Some say it was 4 angels because it says the word angel 4 times, and some say 5 angels because it says Vayomer, 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 Vayomer. Each verse is Vayomer la malach Adonai. It's Vayomer Hagar. Vayomer Hagar shivchat Sarai emi zebad ve'ana telechi Vayomer la Vayomer la Vayomer la. If you count them, you'll see there's 5 of them. He said to her. So some say it's 4 angels, some say it's 5 angels. Now we come to something important. They're going to predict the birth of Yishmael. Vayomer lo malach Adonai, verse 11. Hina chara. He's saying, you are with child, but it's actually Rashi says hinachrash, but she's not pregnant. She miscarried. So how was she pregnant? So Rashi says keshetashuvi tahari. When you return, you will become pregnant. Hinach hara means you shall become pregnant, and he brings a proof here from the book of Judges when the mother of Samson is also told, Hinach Ra'ah. V'yaladet ben. And you will give birth to a son. V'kra'o shma, and you call his name. This is all in verse 11. Kra'o shma Yishmael. V'karat shma Yishmael. V'karat shma, what does it mean, v'karat shma? And you shall call, meaning it's a command. Tzivui, this is a command. She's being commanded by the angel from God. Kamasha mer lazachar, v'karati et shma Yitzchak. As it says later, v'karat shma Yitzchak, and you shall call his name Yitzchak. And he will be v'hu yiyeh pere Adam. He will be a pere Adam. What's a pere Adam? Ohev midbarot latzud chayot. He likes wildernesses to hunt animals. Kama shekatuv vayehi roveh kashat, and he shot with a bow. Vayeshev b'midbar Paran, and he dwelt in the midbar of Paran. Yada bakol v'yad kol bo. His hand will be against everyone. Yada bakol means list him. He'll through robbery, through robbers. The yad kolba, and everybody's hand will be against him. Hakol son in oto, umidgarin boy, and attack him. So yada bakol v'yad kolbo. V'alpnei kol echav yishkon, and in the face of his brethren shall he dwell. V'alpnei kol echav yishkon, on the face of all his brethren he will live. She'yeh zara gadol, his seed will be plentiful. He'll be a great nation. So this is a key verse. Chapter 16, verse 11 and 12 is the center of the chapter. That it says, "Vayomer la malach," an angel said to her, "Malach Adonai, hinach hara, you are pregnant, or you're going to be pregnant. V'yaladet bain, and you're going to give birth to a son. V'karachma Yishmael. Yishmael means God has heard. Yishma and El, God has heard. Shama El, ki shama Adonai, because God has heard El onyech, because God has heard your affliction. V'hu, and he will be Pere Adam." In other words, it's continuing with a not niceness. What is this? I mean, announcing you'll have a son and he's going to be a Pere Adam, a wild man. Pere Adam. Yada bakol, his hand will be against everyone, and the hand of everyone will be against him. So he's going to be a rough character. You're having a son, and he's going to be a rough character. And in the face of all his brethren shall he dwell. He'll be an invader. This is how Islam spread, by the way. From a small little tribe in Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, they spread throughout North Africa and the Middle East, and even into the southern parts of Europe. Spread. So then she, in recognition, said, "This is the God that spoke to her." Okay, and the name of the well. And then she went back, Vateled Hagar, Alken Karela Be'er. Okay, and then it skips events, and verse 15 says right away, Vateled Hagar Lavram ben, and Hagar bore to Abram a son, Vayikra Avram Shem Bena, Asher Yalda Hagar Yishmael, that he named the son that Hagar bore Yishmael. And then verse 16, Vavram ben Shmanim Shana v'Sheish Shanim beledet Hagar et Yishmael Abram. And Abram was 86 years old. Let's see verse 15. Vayikra Avra Shem. Afal pi shalosh shama Avram divrei hamalach. Wait a minute. How does Avram know what to name Yishmael? He wasn't around when the angel said to Hagar that you're going to have a son and name him Yishmael. So Rashi says, even though Abram was not around then, he called him Yishmael. Sharsa Ruach HaKodesh Alav Ukra Yishmael. The Ruach HaKodesh, again, mention of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit rested on him, and he called him Yishmael. And I saw in one of the commentaries said that it was Hagar herself told Abram what the angel had told her, and so Abram named him Yishmael. I want to look at a couple of things here in the Midrash Rabbah before we conclude. Add a little bit of spicing. Okay, so now it said that Sarai did not bear to him, to Avram, she didn't bear to him sorry about that bump, she did not bear to Avram a son, right? So there's a commentator here, Rabbi Yehuda said, to him teaches she did not bear to Abram, but had she been married to another man, she would have borne children. So it implies that Abram was the sterile one, right? That's what this commentator is implying, that had she been married to another man, she would have borne children. Others say she was born without a womb even. So, but this is not this interpretation. Rabbi Nechemiah said, neither to him nor to anyone else. No, she couldn't have kids, either by Abram or by anyone else. So then how does Rabbi Nechemiah interpret did not bear to him, right? Did not bear to him. Interpret to him and to her. Thus, she did not bear to herself on Sarah's own account, nor to him on Abram's account. So it was neither her or his ability to have children. Let's move on. Why were the matriarchs barren? Question, why were the matriarchs barren? Asked the Medrash. Reb Levi said, in Reb Shila's name, and Reb Chalba and Reb Yochanan's name, because the Holy One, blessed be He, yearns for the prayers and for their prayers and supplications. Because God wants to hear the prayers of the righteous. So therefore, He left Sarai and later Rivka and Rachel, and there's going to be the story of Hannah, others in Jewish history, and even today, women who have problems with fertility issues, who cannot have children. Their mission in this world is not done. It's not. Well, that's it. Just give up. On the contrary, God wants to hear their prayers. He has a special reason for subjecting certain people to certain tests. And at the bottom of it all, according to this interpretation, like it says, why were the matriarchs barren? Rabbi Levi said, in the name of Rabbi Shila and in the name of Rabbi Chalba and Rabbi Yochanan, because the Holy One, blessed be He, yearns for their prayers and supplications. Okay, it's an important principle. One more point that I wanted to share with you. He'll be a Pere Adam. We just saw that Yishmael is going to be a Pere Adam. What does that mean? He shall be a Pere, literally a wild ass of a man. Ass not in the human physiognomy, but an animal, like a beast. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish debated this. Rabbi Yochanan said it means that while all people are bred in civilized surroundings, he should be reared in the wilderness. So that's it. You see the original Yishmaelites were bred in the wilderness, and they still live. Saudi Arabia is a big wilderness. Reish Lakish said it means a savage among men, a little bit harsher, and in its literal sense, for whereas all others plunder wealth, he plunders lives. He's not so much concerned with wealth, but as plundering lives to establish his rule, not for just any old reason. Okay, so that's that. And then I wanted to take a look at the Midrash says, it says that it's a special privilege when God names a person before they were born. It's a special privilege given to very few people. And this is mentioned also in the Midrash, but it's Midrash, this is Midrash says that gives it. 4 people were named by Hashem before birth. Yitzchak, as it says in Bereshit, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Yitzchak. That's Isaac. He was named before his birth by God. Shlomo, Solomon, King Solomon, as Hashem told David, King David, in Divrei Hayamim. Divrei Hayamim is the book of Chronicles. Behold, the son shall be born to you. His name shall be Shlomo. Right? So Solomon's name was predicted before. Yoshiyahu, that is, how do you say it in English? Josiah. King Josiah was a righteous king late on in the times of the kingdom of Judah, before the destruction of the second temple. Eventually he was killed in a war, but he was a very righteous king. He reestablished the temple. As it states, behold, a child shall be born to the house of David, Yoshiyahu by name. So his name was predicted before he was born. And then, of course, Yishmael, as Hagar was told, you shall bear a son and call his name Yishmael. And then it goes on that receiving a name before birth signifies greatness. It's a sign of greatness. Yitzchak, Isaac, was named before birth, since he was the founder of the Jewish people as the first child born from holy parents. So Yitzchak is the first born Jew. Abram and Sarai were converts. But Yitzchak is the first Jew born into the religion, the first, as they say, FFB, from birth. Shlomo was the builder of the Beit HaMikdash. Shlomo was the builder of the first temple, the Bayit Rishon, the Beit HaMikdash. In Yoshiahu's time, the 10 tribes were returned to Eretz Yisrael, a forerunner of the future miracle of gathering in the exiles. Well, there is a commentary in the Talmud tractate Megillah, based on verses in the life of Yoshiahu, Josiah, that says he destroyed the altars that existed in the kingdom of Israel that had previously existed. There were two kingdoms, and the northern kingdom was taken into captivity by the Assyrians, and they took the 10 tribes into captivity, and all that remained was the kingdom of Judah. So much later on, that one of the kings of Judah, this Yoshiahu, Josiah, went to those areas where the former kingdom of Israel had been, and he destroyed some more altars and things that had to do with idol worship, as well as in his own country. He cleaned out the whole country and the areas where the former kingdom of Israel was, and he had mercy on the grave of some great person there. And in the Talmud, they say that supposedly he started the gathering in of the 10 tribes, that he actually gathered in the 10 tribes. It doesn't go into details. Now, whether it means literally he gathered in the 10 tribes after they were lost, so if they were lost, how did he gather them in? These are very complex and complicated questions. I don't have the answers for them, but the Talmud does say that Yoshiahu started the ingathering, or that he actually gathered in the 10 tribes after they had been lost. So that's a great accomplishment, and it's also a sign for the future times when all the lost Jews will be gathered in the times of the Mashiach, and there'll be Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, who will sort out and bring back any lost Jews, including those from the lost tribe, the 10 lost tribes. And then finally, Yishmael was named before birth, showing that he was given the potential to rise to greatness. Had his descendants overcome their evil impulses, they could have made themselves worthy of receiving the Torah. There is such a commentary. This is based on 136. Taf Tzadik. Let me just see what this is. Tiferes Tzion, according to a commentary called Tiferes Tzion. Okay, he could have merited to receive the Torah. But the truth of the matter is, Yishmael has great merits, because when Rome was ruling in the world, and then eventually Rome turned into the Roman Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic Empire, they were very strong. They were the dominant empire in the world. And then, out of the blue, came the Muslims in around the year 700, literally out of the deserts. They arose from nowhere, and they conquered back a huge part of the Roman Empire. They took back all of North Africa from the Romans. They took back, and that's from the Byzantines and other empires that existed there. But basically, they pushed back the Christians. They even crossed over into Spain and took over most of Spain, and it became Islamic. They pushed into Europe, the Baltic areas. That's why there's a lot of European-type Muslims over there. Bosnia, those areas were taken over by eventually the Ottomans, destroyed the Byzantine Empire. So, going, that's in the 1400s. But from the 700s to the 1400s, Islam really expanded, and it's still expanding. So it has a positive purpose because it counterbalances the Christians. The Jews, of course, are caught in the middle, but the rise of Islam and of the Islamic nations is a counterbalance to the force and the rise of the Western and the Christian nations. So they cancel each other out. So to speak, Yishmael is doing us a favor, because we're a tiny people. The Jewish people is a tiny people, persecuted by everyone, for 2,000 years, not in their land, just barely trying to survive. And the Christians were very dominant. That the Romans had destroyed the temple, spread the people throughout the world. There were Jews in Babylonia. Eventually, Islam comes along and counterbalances this whole Christian thrust. At one point, the Christians controlled Israel. The The Crusaders conquered Eretz Yisrael and ruled it for over 100 years, maybe close to 200 years, 150 years for sure, until the Muslims came and pushed them out. So, and there's still this seesaw fight between the Islamic and the Christian world, between the European and the Middle Eastern Oriental world. Okay, so Yishmael does have a higher purpose, and now in this chapter we've seen the birth of Yishmael. We have not yet seen the birth of Esav. Esav will be the progenitor of the Western nations, because you could ask, okay, so who's the Western nations? Who's the Christian nations? Who's Rome? That's Edom. That comes from Esav. That comes from Isaac's, Yitzchak's side. He has twin sons, Jacob and Esau is the progenitor of the West, eventually of Christianity, of Rome and of Christianity. Okay, so we have an introduction to that. So we've covered a lot of ground now in this chapter, and thank you very much for your attention. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact me. My email is rudomin@jpi.org or rudomin@att.net. Thank you so much, and be well.